Hello and welcome back to the Creative Connection. I am Cyndi Thomsen, and today we're talking about one of the bravest, most overlooked parts of being a leader, leadership, and life in general. The courage that it takes to begin again, to start over, to shift gears, to realize that what you're doing may not be the right thing, and to stop, take a moment to breathe, and begin again. Seasons change, and September for me has always been a time of reflection. When I was a young girl growing up, I loved September because school started, and with school came the possibility for new friendships, new activities, new clothes. And I grew up in the Midwest, and I loved cold weather. So the warm nights in September and the cool mornings were some of my best times of year. The rhythms, the shift, the fresh energy, the fresh air. Last week, we explored what it meant to pause. Today, we're stepping into what comes next, the moving forward part, even after setbacks, burnout, falling down, getting back up, and seasons of doubt. I'm going to start with a story today, and I may have shared bits and pieces of this story over the course of the last year in my blog. Well, it's really on the forefront of my mind because it is what prompted my memoir. And that is the summer of 2016. I had the wonderful opportunity to travel to New York City with my husband. I'm going to rewind a little bit to right before that trip. In fact, almost a year before that trip. I had walked away from a job that was very toxic. My husband and I agreed that we could be okay if I just got a part-time job or maybe did theater again, and he would take care of things. Our kids were all grown. They'd all graduated from high school pretty much by then. And so I was touring with a children's theater company in August of 2015. And while I was on the Washington coast, my husband called me and said, "They're concerned about my health. My PSA is rather elevated. It's jumped a lot in just the last year." Now, if you're not familiar with what a PSA is, that is the marker for whether prostate cancer is present or not present, or could potentially be present. Well, his had jumped up 5 points in 1 year, which was cause for concern. Now, here I was in Aberdeen, Washington, on a good day, I'm going to say 3 hours, probably closer to 6 hours away from my husband, who had just been given this news. And I was spending the night in a hotel, getting ready to do 2 children's shows the next day and then drive back with 3 very good friends. And my mind was racing and spinning. The next 5 months had us in decision-making mode because they did determine that it was prostate cancer. Now, my husband and I at the time were only 55 years old. It's a little young to get prostate cancer, or at least in my opinion, that's a little young to get prostate cancer because both of our fathers had been living with it for years. December, we went through the operation for Dan to have his prostate removed, and I was feeling rather down. I had to shift away from a job that I loved to find something else that could pick up the pieces of what his job was not doing. And I had no idea what to do. If you've ever gone someplace and you have no idea what to do, inside you kind of feel like you're shaking, you're vibrating, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I was in that state. So when he asked me if I wanted to go to New York City, a city that I had always wanted to go to because I had my sights set on being a professional actor when I was young. My life took a different journey and a different path, and that's fine because I still get to experience theater and I get to play with theater. I jumped at the opportunity to go for a week and see as many shows as I could fit into that week and spend time with my husband. We arrived late, very early on a Sunday morning. We find something to do that day. In fact, we went and saw Shakespeare's Macbeth in Marcus Garvey Park in Harlem, done by an entirely African-American cast and crew, and it was fabulous. It was set in the Caribbean, and the drums just beat, and they stuck with me. And on Monday, we played tourist, and we did the hop-on, hop-off bus. We went and saw the 9/11 memorial, and then we came back, and we went to Birdland to a variety show. Jim Caruso's, what's it called? Jim Caruso's Party. The next day, we were going to see if we could get a part of the live drawing lottery tickets to go see Hamilton. But that night, I was going to see my very first Broadway show, Something Rotten. So we stood in line outside the Richard Rodgers Theater. We went through the whole drawing. We were in the group that potentially would have been picked. We weren't picked. And then it was time to go and do our touristy things before we headed back to go see the show that night. That particular day had us going to Central Park and eating food at a place a friend of ours had recommended. And my husband got to see the American Museum of Natural History. Well, sometime between standing in line for Hamilton and arriving at the American History of Natural Museum, my left hip, really started to ache. And I needed to rest. I knew I needed to rest. It was very painful. So I waited on a bench outside of the museum while my husband went in. And I people watched, and I tried to take my mind off of what was happening with my body because I didn't know what was happening with my body. And he finished with the museum. He came out and we went into the park. Now, the area in which we entered was by the American Natural History Museum. And it was a downhill climb or slope to the Shakespeare Garden on the left. And then if you continue around on this path, you end up at Belvedere Castle. And then our plan was to go from Belvedere Castle, take the path that goes under the bridge by Bow Lake, and then back up the hill over by Bethesda Fountain, and then out over on Fifth Avenue so that we could take the bus back to the hotel. Well, when we hit the bottom of the hill, it became very difficult to walk. And this time it wasn't just my left leg, it was my right leg as well. And it wasn't just my leg, it was my feet, my hips. We continued on. I thought, oh good, when we get to Belvedere Castle, I'll have a sit. The castle was closed that day. But we realized we were out of water, so Dan went over near the castle to fill the water bottles up, and I found a place to sit. And when I sat on the rock that looked like a chair, I went, gosh, this doesn't feel any different than when I was standing. The pain was intensifying. When Dan returned with our water bottles, and I knew it was time to stand up and begin walking again, I did. And went, I'm not sure I can do this. Not more than about 10 steps later, I couldn't walk anymore. I was stuck. I had to stop because the pain was so bad. Have you ever found yourself in a position, whether because of a physical issue or an emotional issue or a spiritual issue, where you had to stop? You just could not go on because the pain was too much. In that moment in time, the only thing that kept coming up for me is that Dan doesn't understand what's happening. I'm not going to be able to live out the dream of this vacation. I'm not going to get to see my first Broadway show. I had failed. Something I had done must have caused this pain, this agony. Dan coaxed and prodded and got me to proceed one step at a time up the hill to get us to a rickshaw, where he paid just a couple of dollars to go from there to the exit, which was literally only about 1, maybe 2 city blocks. But then we were going to have to go across the street to catch the appropriate bus. We got across the street, and right before I was about to sit on the bench, the bus we needed pulled up. That bus ride home and the shower that I was taking next to prepare to go out that evening, I spent a lot of time thinking, how am I going to make this work? Do I need to find a doctor? Do I need to tell Dan really what is happening? I had fallen to one of my lowest points in my life, and it was only Tuesday. Tuesday of the week in New York. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday had occurred. We made it to the show, and it has become one of my all-time favorite shows. The rest of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I was in one long pause, trying to figure out how to stay grounded, how to stay centered, how to stay in my body and in the present moment. A lot of things were stirred up that week. The number one thing that stirred up was, what am I doing with my life? Am I on the path that I'm supposed to be on? Remember, I said that I had wanted to do this trip for a very long time because my intention had been to be a professional actor. And my journey went a different way. I realized on that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday when we returned, I realized that perhaps what I was doing with my life was not what I intended to do with my life. In that moment of pause, I found clarity in wanting something more. I found courage and resilience to begin to ask myself questions about what it was that I wanted. Have you ever been in a space and place in time where you wondered why you were doing what you were doing because it didn't make sense? It's okay if you've been there, and I'll tell you why. There are 3 truths that I have come to know about beginning again. And in the work that I do with the people that I work with, this has repeated over and over, much like it did for me that week in New York. First of all, we have to recognize that we're holding on for dear life to old stories. The idea of being a professional actor was not the path that I necessarily needed to be on, but there were elements of that work that are a part of what I do now. I help people release those old stories so that they can start again. Not to erase what's gone on before, but in honoring what you've learned, what I've learned, what we've learned about where we've come from. That's the first truth. Releasing old stories, not to get rid of them, but to honor them. The second thing I learned in trying to get out of Central Park, it is one step at a time, one intentional step forward at a time. Courage is about action and taking one step at a time. The third thing that I learned, and this was hard for me, let me tell you, because I grew up in a family that independence was honored. And if you think about independence, what that means to some, at least in my circle, is independence means you don't ask for help. You can do it yourself. But what I learned from my experience that week in New York, and there have been other times in my life as well, you can't do it alone. You need community. You need circles. You need trusted support that can help lift us up when we fall, can point us in the direction of courage. Courage that we may not be able to muster alone. I think about that journey up that hill in Central Park, and my husband, who is the patience of Job, is standing there going, just one more step, Cyndi. One more step, Cyndi. One more step, Cyndi. You're almost there, Cyndi. We're almost there. One more step, Cyndi. One more step, Cyndi. There have been people that I have met in my life, either when I was working for someone else and I was responsible for training and development, or I was responsible for hiring, or I was responsible for supporting management, that my job was that job that my husband had that day. One more thing, just one more step, just one more thing, just one more step. I've also found that the artists, creatives, change makers, leaders, entrepreneurs that I work with sometimes need that cheerleader standing next to them saying, just one more step. If you can do this one more thing, you're going to be there. You're going to be nearly to the goal you set for yourself. So, as you've listened to my story, and you've listened to the 3 insights that I discovered, I want you to take a moment, if you have not already found yourself doing this, I want you to take a moment to think about a time in your life, maybe it's now, maybe it was another time, a time in your life that you were invited to begin again. Maybe it was during a career change, a relationship change. Maybe within a relationship, you became a parent. You had to reinvent yourself. Maybe it was after the loss of someone very special to you, a parent, a grandmother, a friend. Think of a time that you were invited to begin again. And if you can't think of something right now, come back to this. I would love to offer you a prompt for your journal, whether you do it today or tomorrow, or maybe you do it a couple of days in a row. And this one I wrote down because I wanted to make sure I got it right. Thinking about your life right now and where you want to be by the end of this calendar year, by December 31st, 2025. What is one small next step that you can take this week to move toward what matters most? So in writing this down, it would be, what's one small next step I can take this week to step toward what matters most, the thing I want, where I want to be by the end of this year. I'll repeat it one more time. What's one small next step I can take this week to step towards what matters most and where I want to be by December 31st, 2025. Everyone is at a different stage and place in their life. I was getting my hair done earlier today prior to leaving for a trip tomorrow. And the young woman that cuts my hair is in her 30s. And she is at a point in her life where things are changing rapidly around her. And one of the things I do when I sit in her chair is quite often I'll say, where is it that you would want to be a year from now? 5 years from now? When your son, who's going to be in first grade, graduates from high school, where do you want to be? And the first time I asked her that question was probably in the month of April, and I ask it in a different way each time I see her, and I see her every 6 to 8 weeks because my hair grows really fast. And today was the first day that she said, I've really been thinking about that question. And the next time you come in, I'll probably have more understanding of where that is I want to be. She has a lot going on in her life right now. If you're ready to reset, to begin again, to clarify the path that you may have already started. Or you're looking for support to help you, because remember, the third insight, don't begin alone. You can't do it alone. You need support. You need community. Then I invite you to Rooted in You, a circle of 10 women that will be beginning on September 24th. This is a space for pausing, for reconnecting with yourself, and beginning again with clarity and courage, surrounded by a circle that sees you, hears you, and supports you. The link for more information about it is in the show notes. I encourage you to check it out. If there's a little nudge going on inside that says, oh, I should look at that, that might be just what I need. Also, remember, every Sunday I do a companion blog post that gives you a little bit more of what we've chatted about today. Beginning again isn't weakness. If you are a creative artist, you are an entrepreneur, you are in a leadership position for a large corporation or a small corporation, you are a change maker, a thought leader. Beginning again sometimes is the most courageous step you can take. I'm very excited. I'm going to have a friend on next week, and we will have a conversation about beginning again. My friend has begun again a number of times in her life. And this new beginning that she has undertaken, based on what my gut tells me, based on what I think the universe is trying to tell me about her and God, this is the path, the journey that she was meant to take. It is my belief. And I look forward to sitting here and having a conversation with her about what it means to begin again. Thank you so much for listening to The Creative Connection, whether you are on right at 5 o'clock this week, or you come back and listen to it another time, or choose to share it. Know that I'm here. I believe in helping people reclaim their voice, reclaim their vision, and grab a hold of what matters most in their life. Subscribe, share, check the show notes out for Rooted in You Circle and the link for the blog. And if you ever want to have a conversation, I offer a 30-minute free conversation called a visioning call, where we just talk about what you might envision for yourself. Again, thank you for listening to The Creative Connection. Until next time, remember, every pause creates space for new beginnings. Have a wonderful week.